And welcome to Civil Discourse. I'm Jamie Wojciechowski.
And I'm Marilyn Brown. And today we're going to be discussing how to create a mindful discussion around healthcare. And I actually want to start us off with a quote, and then we'll be talking about Jimmy Kimmel's monologue that he gave on Monday night about his son's congenital heart defect. So the quote is actually Emma Lazarus it's probably part of the most famous thing that's inscribed on the Statue of Liberty. And so the part that I'm going to read is, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, the tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." So that's the quote that I want to share. And I want to just go into by starting off by giving a little bit of an intro. That it's been trending pretty heavily over the last couple of days. Jimmy Kimmel gave a monologue on Monday night sharing that his son, who was just born, he's just about a week or so, a little over a week old, probably a couple of weeks now. His son, Billy, Jimmy and his wife, Molly, their second child, was born, and pretty quickly they found out that he had a congenital heart disease and had a hole in his heart. And this monologue just kind of want to, his. I was really struck by how raw it was. A lot of times when people share something like this, it's maybe a couple of years after it's happened and it's months later. But for him to come on the air, for his first monologue after it happened and really share kind of struck me. But I want to get your thoughts on what that was like, seeing his monologue, what your thoughts were on that.
Right. Well, I think it was very important because I'm not a big watcher of night talk shows in general, but I think so. What I see is basically what trends, and I think most of it tends to be um, comedic side of things. Him scaring. I mean, I think of him scaring the kids on Halloween with the candy and,
Mhm.
and and things like that. And I think it is important to also share those kind of meaningful moments as well, especially when it comes to healthcare, because I feel like this is done on purpose, but it it's it's often where we're at now. They want to keep the dialogue a partisan conversation so that nothing productive happens. Like so much of the conversation, whether you like Obamacare or not, is about repealing or not repealing Obamacare. And yes, the Republicans would probably love to repeal it, but the other tactic there is to keep everyone distracted when in reality the vast majority of people agree on where healthcare should be going. And I
Yes.
think hearing those personal stories is what helps us move the conversation to an important and real and non-partisan place. What I had actually two reactions. I had the reaction of watching it, and then the reaction of seeing how the media was portraying it.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved watching it, and then was angered by the headlines about it because so much of it was about uh, Obamacare, and they were making it partisan. And he really said nothing about being pro Obamacare, what's going on the political side with Obamacare. It was more about um, the importance of not going back and having all these people who are not covered, which to
Mm-hmm.
me is a different conversation because whether you support Obamacare or not, that's something that should be agreed upon. Is we don't want to go to a time where even more people have less access to healthcare. And
Mhm.
if Obamacare isn't the best solution, then we have to move forward to something that's better, not move back to what was worse.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I can definitely see your point that, watching it and just kind of hearing his authenticity about his own experience was really powerful and really, really moving. I know for me, I probably cried through the whole 13 minutes. I mean,
So
I
did
cry a lot,
I.
but I heard this from a lot of people that it was just very, very moving for them, because you're right. It takes the partisan politics out of it, and it brings it to people and to experiences. And it's like, how, would you're able to put yourself in those parents' shoes and in that family's shoes, and feel what they're feeling and say, no, we don't need to go backwards. That's not the way to solve the issues with the Affordable Care Act. But I do think that he was intentionally being, I don't know if the word is political, but just being an activist in a way, an activist for healthcare, for people having coverage. And I definitely did hear that. And I think because currently we are in a week where, and this has been happening, this is the third try, but the, Trump administration is trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act and replace it with, I can't remember the acronym, AHCA, Trump Care. And so, I do think that there was I did get a sense of kind of an urgency on his part to speak honestly about this and to let people know that this really is a people and a human issue rather than partisan. But I do think that you're right, that there's always that kind of ability for the partisan media to latch onto something and make it, whatever they want to, and kind of turn it into um, this huge support for something that it really isn't. So I do see that, but I also think that's kind of inevitable in a way. That's kind of part of the process that we deal with everything, being so media driven.
Yeah, and I think for I do think that the positive side is that most people now um, see that, and they see kind of the media trying to make it uh, a partisan political um, moment,
Mm-hmm.
and most people when they watch it do see that that's not that it was authentic, and it was about it. It's not that it wasn't about politics. It was about something deeper, and it
Yeah.
wasn't about really picking a side or any of those things that divide us. It was about trying to bring us together. The one thing that the one moment I did question was when he did say that after he gave the monologue, he said that healthcare should be something that we all agree on. And I do think that the majority of a good majority of people do agree with him, but there are a group of people who actually legitimately don't. They
Disagree.
don't
Yeah.
think it's their job to. They don't understand the current healthcare system. One, it's just why they do
Right.
this, but they truly would say that if a parent can't afford to save their child with the money that they earn, that the child should die.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something we have to also acknowledge, that there are people who think like that, and that that is really where the challenge is.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right. I think that we avoid acknowledging that reality. I think that we want to think that everyone is convincible, about this issue, and that if people just understand enough, like, look, it's a baby, this is an innocent child. And yet, you're right. There are still people that feel that it doesn't matter. that those things aren't important, that it's not the society as a whole's kind of responsibility to support each other in that way. And I think you're right. A lot of it has to do with just not understanding the healthcare and insurance system, because that's what it is. It's like, well, why do I have to pay for sick people? That's how it works. And yet, I do think that when we don't acknowledge that reality, that we kind of trick ourselves into thinking that that it's just about getting people to understand. And I think that can be kind of dangerous, because I think that we do need to recognize that that's just not the reality, that there's people that do disagree with that and won't be convinced, and that, I don't know what the strategy is for dealing with that, other than to kind of continue to move forward and be vocal about the things that you do feel like are important. And yet recognizing everybody is not going to agree.
Mm-hmm. I think another way to help with that is for people to not be scared to share their stories, because what's Jimmy Kimmel's a personality, so he's gonna be able to touch the people who are open to listening to a celebrity, but people who aren't willing to listen to a celebrity might be willing to listen to their family and friends who have dealt with these things. And I think a lot of it stems from, I mean, it sounds harsh when you say, and no one's going to say it, they'll kind of bounce around it, that they believe that they shouldn't have to pay for that child's healthcare.
Right.
But I think it doesn't stem from, it comes from a place of them feeling taken advantage of, and like they are living in a hard place where they're working and not seeing the benefit, or they don't see the collective help, so they see it as they're paying for this other person, but they're not seeing any benefit. So if they don't get that, why should someone else? And I think there's two ways to handle that. Either they have to see that they are benefiting, or that it is a thing where we're all in it together, or the people who they care about have to change their mind through giving them new experiences.
I agree with that, and I think that's a really kind of important part to talk about. And I think that really brings a lot of the mindful perspective into it for me, is that mindset is coming from, that kind of idea or feeling of scarcity. That there's not enough resources, there's not enough, and that's fear driven. And, the thing that this administration and Trump during his campaign, and he's been doing it for a very long time, if you look back over his tweets for years, he's really been able to tap into people's fears of scarcity and their worries about what this world is going to leave for them, and they're not just scarcity, but safety and security. And so, you look at the rhetoric around immigration, and it's, drugs and murderers are coming in, so we have to keep these things out. And so that's a very that's like the oldest tactic, to kind of get people to stop seeing the humanity in other people and start to kind of wall ourselves off. And I think that the more we can raise our awareness about that and kind of see that this is what's going on, I think that helps. But again, it's not going to erase it. And I think you're right that it's going to be people within these communities talking to each other and sharing their experiences, because there's a lot of, there's an intentional lack of other perspectives. There's an actual intentional, drive to force other perspectives out. You look
Right.
at these rallies, and it's like, get them out of here. This person disagrees with me, and so we don't want anyone to hear these dissenting ideas. And so I think that you know that it is going to take people talking to each other in their own communities to really make a difference. But I also, to speak to your previous point about um, people sharing their truth, and Jimmy Kimmel, like you said, is a celebrity, and so he has a platform, and there's people that are open to that, but also regular people sharing their own experience. And for me, that's something that I think is really important. And I want to share a little bit about my own experience with healthcare, because it's something that I never really had to think much about until the last couple of years. So in 2015, towards the end of 2015, I, probably started feeling just a little bit off, but not anything too extreme, just kind of little mild symptoms that I wasn't really worried about. And I had had health insurance my whole life through, school and my parents, and then working. And when I moved to LA, I became self-employed. And so I didn't have group health insurance any longer. And so, to kind of fast forward, I was basically ended up where my vision, I wasn't able to see straight, and my vision went double kind of suddenly. One morning I woke up and like just the world did not look normal. And so I went to the emergency room, and actually this is pretty amazing because with my diagnosis, sometimes it can take years to diagnose, but I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And so this is like October 2015. And so again, didn't have health insurance at the time. And through the Affordable Care Act, I was actually able to get health insurance for the time that I was sick, and then get coverage. And, yes, my premium is higher than I would like it to be, but it's still affordable for me to be able to take care of my own care and still be self-employed and be able to be an entrepreneur and kind of try to build what we talk about as the American dream, and these kind of qualities of America that we really value, or say we value, and so being able to kind of help people make it. And so I see the Affordable Care Act as something that's really helped me be able to make it and to survive. And, with multiple sclerosis, this is something I'm going to have health care my entire life. I'm going to, be on medication or some form of treatment forever. It's chronic. And so also, speaking about chronic illness, I now have a pre-existing condition. And as of October 2015, I now have this label over my head of being somebody that has a pre-existing condition. And, right now with the administration's third attempt to repeal the ACA, pre-existing conditions are not protected in the way that they were. And it's going back to allowing states to decide what to do. And we already have seen that majority of states do not have protection for people with pre-existing conditions. And so I might have to pay a 3 times premium. And I understand again that, there are people that say, tough, that's too bad, you're sick, so you have to pay more. And that's just the system. But I also think that that's not the majority of Americans. I think that, going back to my initial quote, that the majority of us do have faith in America's being a place where you can come and be protected, and and that everyone is welcome, including people with illnesses, including babies who were born and will have to have multiple surgeries throughout their life. So that's just kind of a little bit about my story, to just share how, personally I've been affected. And I think that, it's just important to kind of be able to talk about these things. So
Right.
glad that I did.
Yeah. And I think too, what people don't realize is I lived in the UK for a while, that has a universal healthcare system, which has its own issues. It's
Mm-hmm.
nowhere near a perfect system, but being in Europe, where that's the the standard, it it was just interesting, the mindset, because it's just not something you worry about. You don't live your life ever worrying about healthcare. And in America, it's a common discussion everywhere you go. No matter if you're completely healthy or incredibly ill, and that uh, that affects your life on all varying levels. That
Yes.
uh, other people living in places that have an inclusive healthcare system don't deal with. And I think what ends up happening is I think it's important for people who care about this issue and for activists to stay diligent in having the actual conversation on how to improve the system and not getting distracted or caught up in the the noise that's created by the the media and the government and the insurance companies, because the conversation we should be having is how do we improve the system and what system is best. I mean, we're talking about people who don't feel like their premiums are too high and don't want to pay for other people, and there's a conversation to be had about, yes, it may seem like you're paying for other people, but if it wasn't about paying corporations for insurance, your premiums would go down
Hmm.
because there wouldn't be all that profit center
Hmm.
there. And the thing about living in the UK was, yes, it's a universal healthcare system, and some people really didn't like it, but having a public, that's why I like when it's called a public option, because that's how it's an option in most countries. So
Hmm.
you have that base of universal healthcare, but if you want to have some special
Hmm.
healthcare on top of it, there is private insurance that gives you perks and special add-ons, if you will, that you're 100% able to get, and it doesn't raise their quote unquote premiums any higher, because now those private insurance companies are competing with the universal system. So
Hmm.
they're they keep their prices lower to try to attract people to having those add-ons.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think all of those are really, really good and important points to make. And I also want to, think about that, you know, it's important to talk about what type of system to have and what's going to be the most effective. But I think it's also important to talk about why it's important to have a healthy population in general. I think that one of the kind of core values that I feel like I've gotten from this current administration is strength and wanting to be strong, wanting to be seen as a strong, competitive country and nation. And so a sick nation is not a strong nation. A nation where people are not able to, get their basic needs taken care of is not a strong nation. And it makes us less competitive. And you think about a lot of the things that are happening, and that's a concern. And so it's like, if you don't value other people and kind of a collective, shared experience, if maybe you value strength and you want us as a nation to be strong. Well, that's part of creating a strong nation, is having a healthy and well-educated. I won't go down the education rabbit hole right now, but that's also part of having a strong, you know, population. And so I think that's something to talk about as well, because we don't really hear anybody talking much about how that affects our country as a whole when we have so many people without health care, and not just individuals, because again, I think the individual stories are so important, but also as a whole, it can really be crippling for us. And I don't know that conversation is being had enough either.
Right, and I think the another conversation that's important to have specifically with people who don't agree with um, a universal healthcare system or moving in that direction, whatever it means, um, is what actually makes us a nation. Because there's this idea of the the individual, but as a nation we are together, and the individual, it's really impossible in our society to thrive as a separate individual. Like you have, if you look at it, you have your career, but you need the grocery store, you need other people, and it's all interconnected, in our roads, and there's socialist elements in our government
Yeah.
already that are vital to us thriving, both as a nation and a group, and as an individual. And the thing I always find interesting is they do these studies every year of what countries are the happiest, right? And it's all relative in the end. But if you look at how they decide that, it's a really interconnected process of what really gives a good standard of living that makes people happy. And it is those subtle things about, well, their healthcare might not be the best, but they don't worry about it, and
Mhm.
they aren't competing with, there's a good minimum wage, and there's education that makes them feel empowered and capable of achieving things. There's um, free college,
Mhm.
and they don't have to worry about saving 50, $100,000 to go to college. And when you have an educated workforce, that benefits everybody, because
Yeah.
then if the people you're working with are educated, the people you're employing are educated, your bosses are educated, it's I think it's an oversimplification to separate yourself and think, I'm over here and everyone else is over here, and I need to look out for myself and can't help anyone else. Because when I help, and the thinking behind it is that when I help everyone else, I can't help myself. But
Mhm.
the reality is that when everyone's thriving,
Mhm.
it's more likely that you will thrive.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's such a great point that I hadn't really thought about. And it's not like people argue that our defense is socialized. That it's not like people can say, "Oh, well, I'm just going to be over here and protect myself. I don't want the military to take care of me." I mean, there's so many elements of the way we run as a nation that is socialized, and yet, you know, healthcare becomes this thing that we want to parse out and make individual. And, it really doesn't make a lot of sense as far as just kind of in line with, again, the stated values of America and kind of what we're trying to represent. And it seems pretty counter um, to that. And so, yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. I mean, I've thought about that before, but I hadn't really thought about that to that degree. And I think that is really important.
Well, for me, it doesn't. Oh, specifically on healthcare, um, it it is like the military in that it affects all of us. Sure, there's diseases that are hereditary and individual, but there's a good portion of diseases that, if everyone was on their own and a good portion of the population couldn't afford healthcare and wasn't getting covered, they're going to be passing on diseases to you because they're not being treated. So
Yeah.
you are going to be directly affected because we don't have a system that looks out for everybody and is just about the individual. And I think that's an important part to stress, um, for people who haven't fully thought about it, because that's a huge aspect to why it's so important for us to work together to help everybody, and not just worry about ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Trying to think if there's any other questions or thoughts I have for you. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think I feel like I said everything and that I wanted to say on that topic. What about you?
Me too. Yeah, I think,
Thoughts?
yeah, gave me lots to think about.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Me too. So for homework, I hadn't really thought about anything going into it, but just your point about the importance of people sharing our stories. And so I would like to challenge everybody to share your own experience, your own story, your own experience with healthcare, positive, negative, neither, both. But just sharing your own experience. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing online, because I definitely can understand that, sharing with somebody in your life, so talking to a friend or a neighbor that maybe you never let know what was going on, but have talked to and feel comfortable with. And so that's my challenge for you guys this week. But I would also love to hear if you are comfortable with sharing. We would love to hear in Mindfulness in Action on Civil D on Facebook in the group. And you can also find us at Civil D TV.
Yay. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Have a good week, guys.
Bye.